Director of Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute and author of the book, The 100-Year Marathon, Michael Pillsbury joins me. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Greta.
Do you think that there's going to be, if this is banned from the federal government devices, we've seen states now ban TikTok from state government devices. Do you think that there'll be any sort of retaliation from the Communist China government in any way, in any form?
Not direct retaliation, no, but I think the Chinese have noticed what your last guest just told you. Nancy Pelosi is rhetorically against China, but when it comes to concrete action, like agreeing to a vote next week on this unanimous Senate bill, she just doesn't do it. There's a growing pattern now. When I was a Senate staffer, we used to joke, I was tutored, that there are show horses and work horses, or show boats and work horses. And what usually happens is the media doesn't know the difference between a few co-sponsors passing something and a real law that's passed by both houses and then signed by the president. We've got a series of issues now that China is getting away with murder, almost literally in the case of fentanyl, and legislation doesn't actually pass. I had hoped earlier today that Nancy Pelosi would commit to this and we'd have the actual example of something really serious being done, both houses passing. Biden obviously would have to sign it. But don't forget, it only covers a very teeny number of phones in the hands of federal officials. There's a story a couple days ago that 10% of the country, 10% of the adults of America rely on TikTok every day as their major news source. So we have a huge problem, first with Huawei, now with TikTok, in terms of Chinese espionage against us, that the FBI director spoke out against a few days ago. And I was quite pleased. Mark Warner, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, he used the words Trump was right about TikTok. So something strange is happening. And I've noticed you sometimes, Greta, very persuasively saying, why isn't there action? There's too much talk and no actual action. I fear that's what we're going to see now on the TikTok bill, and it remains impossible to pass good legislation about China.
Well, what a Chinese corporation? I mean, is there such a thing as an independent corporation, or are they all just a branch of the Chinese Communist government?
Well, they've got a law that says if Chinese government asks for your help, you must give it, or you're a criminal. We don't have that kind of law. Most democracies do not. You can turn down a government request. So Chinese companies, we grade them, whether they're totally owned by the Communist Party, which is some, or they're state-owned, but they're partially privately owned, or they're entirely private. TikTok is owned by a state-owned company. So the Chinese government can easily obtain espionage data by putting a little pressure. It wouldn't take much on a TikTok ByteDance executive. So we're dealing with one large entity in China. That's the problem. Whereas we're divided, they're united by the Communist Party.
Turning to the fentanyl, which we discussed earlier part of the show, the DEA says that the precursor drugs come from China. They're then repackaged by the cartels in Mexico, and then they're brought into the United States. Do you think that China is deliberately trying to get that poison on our streets? Or do you think that it's just part of sort of the commerce and the fact that these precursor drugs can be used for other things?
Well, some Democrats have praised President Trump for getting the fentanyl issue going. He started official talks in China, in our embassy. And the Chinese took a very unusual approach, Greta. They said, if you say that we're deliberately doing this, we're not going to have the talks. If you say that this is criminal gangs doing it and China can help, then we'll have the talks. But even now, because of Nancy Pelosi's trip, the Chinese announced they're breaking off the fentanyl talks. They have not restarted. So that, to me, implies that, yes, the Chinese government's got some role in this, whether it's direct, like Fu Manchu, or indirect, that they wink and don't enforce the ban inside China on fentanyl and precursor chemicals. That's hard to say. But isn't it interesting that to enter the talks, the Chinese said we had to say, well, we're not going to accuse you directly of spreading fentanyl in our country. That was the precondition for the talks that, as I say, are now temporarily suspended to punish us for Nancy Pelosi's trip. This is a strange world we live in the U.S.-China relationship.
Michael Pillsbury, thank you, sir.